We're away. Alexander, how are you?
Okay, not bad, Gordon. Thanks for the invite.
Thanks very much for coming. Thanks very much for coming on. These are interesting times that we're living in, aren't they?
Yes, neither of us has been deplatformed and denounced and put in a black bag and sent to a prison in the Falkland Islands yet. So I'm counting it as a win.
Yeah, so it probably won't be the Falkland Islands they send me off. It's probably be some black site in Israel. What I've said about anti-Semitism and the smear campaign that we've been through in the UK.
Oh recently. God, yeah.
You've seen the ridiculousness of it all, haven't you?
Well, I was in the Labour Party for at the height of the Corbyn smears.
You've left now.
I left in I left in early 2019 before the final grisly end of it all. But it was, the painful part was that I could see where it was all going, and it was like watching a car crash. You couldn't stop it.
No. And you couldn't look away either.
No. It was obvious as soon as Corbyn threw Livingston under the bus. As soon as the first ridiculous charge by that ridiculous chancer John Mann came out, that he wasn't going to adequately fight this at all, and I didn't anticipate just how bad it would get in terms of the ability to destroy somebody's reputation so easily. But that's what happens when the man at the top just capitulates, which is what he did every single time. And it's the same on the EU question as well. And so it was, in the end, I felt, well, my efforts here are pretty much a waste of time and energy, and it's likely to drive me to drink if it carries on much longer. So I better get out.
I've just realised I've actually got you through the speakers, and I don't need to have these earphones on like a dick. Yeah, so I saw Craig Murray not long ago, last week, at the Assange thing, and it reminds me of something that he said. He said, I used to have a lot of, he says, I used to say that I used to have a lot of friends in the Labour Party, but now I say I have a lot of friends that have been expelled from the Labour Party. So you left voluntarily, you weren't ejected over something?
And I wasn't ejected. I walked because it was, it was only a matter of time before I was booted. So I decided, you know what, I'll walk now and save myself the trouble. Plus, you try to stick up for some principles, and it makes you enemies inside the Labour Party as well. People who had no interest in fighting.
Yeah, none at all.
And that would.
Sorry, carry on.
They had no interest in actually fighting anything. Corbyn for them was just a meal ticket for a lot of them, especially the ones at the very top, and that's why they were never interested in actually addressing the problems. I mean, either on the anti-Semitism thing, either on the Brexit question, or the wider question of the party democracy is like, how do we stop the hideous right-wing MPs like leaking to the press, constantly trying to destroy the elected leader? And the only way you did that was by essentially getting rid of them as MPs, deselecting them. And then when you wouldn't fight for deselection, and the unions, and the only union who could have pushed it through, Unite, McCluskey, capitulated. Well, we were cooked. And that's the same conference where Starmer stood up and did his "We're the second referendum party." So I thought at that stage, well, there's no way we're going to win. I mean, I know I've lived in the Midlands and the Northwest for most of my life. I know the Brexit voting areas very well. And I know the people there pretty well, and I know they're going to find this position ridiculous. And exactly what I thought would happen did happen, and they lost, and they deserved to lose, quite frankly. Boris Johnson didn't deserve to win, but Corbyn deserved to lose in the end.
Yeah, it's the Labour Party. I mean, it's got to the stage now where the mask's off with it, much like with the Trump over in America. I mean, you know, you can say what you want about Trump, but I feel as if he's the symptom of a larger problem. He rose up out of a system rather than anything else. But I feel as if the Labour Party now, they're done, because I mean that they've been exposed just as the system over in America has been exposed, because it's just plain to see from anybody who's been half awake through the last couple of years that the Labour Party is there to stop any real grassroots movement from the left. It used to be all about that, and now it's become sort of the Democratic Party of the UK, isn't that? It's what Tony Benn always feared, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was always a mixed organisation. It had a lot of working class people in it back in the day.
Yeah.
But its leadership was always more into managing capitalism than actually doing away with it. And when you take that line, you end up being put in a position where your choice is, do you go with the working class or do you go with the ruling class? And the Labour leaders always have chosen to go with the ruling class, preserving capitalism, and end up attacking the working class, demoralising their own supporters, and the Tories come back in. And it's a story that's been repeated over and over again. The difference now is that now we saw just how bad things had gotten inside the Labour Party. Corbyn revealed it unintentionally, given that what destroyed him ultimately was A, his own failures, but B, the failures of the people, not just around him, but the failures of a lot of people in the movement, and criticisms of, you know, myself in there as well. Many of us didn't see the problems until it was too late. Those of us that did were a minority. And also I can't emphasize enough, and I always do, the question of the Brexit vote being respected. The fact that so many on the so-called left were prepared to just flush that down the bog and not see the dangers, or just call everybody who would disagree with them a racist, just showed to me that the left itself in Britain had become Blairite a long time ago.
Yeah.
Even if they called themselves socialist, communist, whatever, didn't matter what they called themselves. They clung onto the EU like a drowning man clings onto a life buoy. But unfortunately for them, this life buoy was made of concrete, and it sank all of them in the end. It was a horrific, but should we say, a learning experience for all of us who dropped out of that or were thrown out.
What do you think? I mean, I don't want to stick on the Labour Party, but what do you think's next for them? Or do you think they're finished as an entity like I do, or do you think they're actually, you know, there's going to be a period of transition, or do you think there's going to be a new party come out? I know there's some talk that Corbyn's going to start a new party. What do you think's going to happen going forward? Because there's no hope for people like you and me. I mean, I'm politically homeless. I will never vote Tory in my life, and I'm certainly never going to vote Labour again.
No, I mean, I think, well, Corbyn's not going to start anything new. I saw that announcement that he made.
And he's
announced is essentially a useless. Yeah, he's just announced an NGO.
Yeah,
that's all he's announced.
Yeah,
it's nothing. There's nothing political to it. It's Corbyn going around telling people, saying to people, "Oh, that's bad, isn't it?" Well, thanks, Jez. Yeah, it is bad. But what makes me angry about him is that there was a man who had an unprecedented opportunity, and in the end proved unequal to it. And all I wish he'd do now is just retire, because all he's doing by hanging around and starting this new organisation, he's giving his fan club on the internet, and it is a fan club. There's not much really political about it. It's a fan club. He's giving them just another means to waste their energies on. And until we get back, until we recapture or build again actual working class power in this country, i.e. the instinctive understanding in the ordinary person that they are the ones through their own labour that shape the world and create all value, and therefore by withdrawing that you have the power to to shape the world as our class needs it, until we recapture that, well, our political efforts are always going to be fragmented and useless. So, I mean, we've seen the end of Trump this week. Sanders capitulated a long time ago. Corbyn capitulated and just got destroyed. And all three of them, I did have one thing in common, which was that their supporters attached themselves to them like a fan club. And none of them were prepared to actually turn that energy into a real movement. Trump he's a con man and an egotist. He likes the acclaim. He was never really in it for a serious confrontation with the American state. He didn't want to end up with his brains over a grassy knoll. And Sanders has spent a lifetime in the Senate. He didn't want to challenge it in any fundamental way. And Corbyn spent, as long as I've been alive, Corbyn has been in Parliament. That's not a guy who's going to challenge anything on his own. So, and we can't go on with this sort of fan club mentality towards politicians. If we do, we're just going to end up back in the same place again.
Yeah, it's. I do agree with you there. I watched what happened to Bernie Sanders over in America, not just last year, but in 2016 as well. And I watched him capitulate to the Democratic Party, not once but twice. I mean, they cheated him outright in 2016, and I'm damn sure that they did it again last year. If you look at the whole Buttigieg thing, and
oh yeah,
and he's still sheepdog. My friend Steve Poikinen says that if he was a rapper, his name would be Sheepdoggy Dog, because that's what he does. He sheepdogs people, sheepdogs progressive into a dead party. And I was listening to Chris Hedges was Ralph Nader's speechwriter. And Chris Hedges says that the reason Bernie Sanders has said the reason that he won't run outside the Democratic Party is because he doesn't want to end up like Ralph Nader. Remember, Ralph Nader's still ostracized in America, isn't he? But yeah, because they blame him for for George Bush being elected. Meanwhile, George Bush now is some sort of hero and writing eulogies about him and Barack Obama and Clinton.
Yeah.
So Ralph Nader is the bad guy because he gave us Bush, but Bush is okay now. The
Supreme Court gave them Bush, but the Democrats don't want to confront that. They didn't want to confront that 21 years ago when it happened. They don't want to confront it now, which is that that election got rigged for George W. Bush, and now all the people who rigged it for George W. Bush probably rigged it for Biden. It's all the same people, but they just switched parties.
It was an incredible turnout, wasn't it? For
I mean,
a country where I know a lot of people in America, and everybody over there knows that there's no point in voting in this system. And they'll obviously it's the highest turnout ever. It's really, that's all down to a pandemic, is it? I don't trust the voting system in America at all, because we've got a system over here where we have paper ballots. And, I sort of like, there's going to be a trace system there. But even so, our system is not nearly as good as some of the other systems in the other parts of the world that our press demonize and say, oh no, that's not a democracy when it's 10 times better than ours. But even so, compared to America's, you've got there are companies where it's, secret software that runs these things, and there's no audit or anything like that. And they say, can we audit it? And they say, oh, sorry, it's all been wiped.
We lost it.
It's all been wiped. Sorry, and we scrubbed 200,000 ballots from New York, etc., etc. I don't trust their democracy at all, and especially when somebody like Tulsi Gabbard brings a bill in 4 paper ballots after the last election, where they all said, "Oh, Russia rigged it," and and Russia broke into the hacked our election. That's what they were saying. Tulsi Gabbard brings through a bill, so here we go, paper ballots, we can have this, and we've got the technology, and it picks up no traction at all. So if you don't want to fix a problem, it's clear that the problem's there for a reason. You're happy for it to carry on. Isn't that right?
The fact that they have, as you said, our voting system is miles away from being perfect, but it takes a lot more effort to stuff a ballot box or destroy a load of paper ballots,
and a lot more
than
people.
It does. More people and a bigger operation, and it's more likely to leak, or somebody's likely to accidentally tweet about it or something. With the voting machines in the United States, they found in the Georgia runoff recently that the machines were connecting to the internet. They were being put online. So you can change hundreds of thousands of votes with a few keystrokes and leave no trace. Or if you do leave a trace, they cover it up. It's ridiculous to call that any. The only kind of democracy that is one that is a phrase that used to be associated with countries like Singapore, which is it's a guided democracy, it's a controlled democracy, it's a managed democracy, meaning that, or an illusion of democracy, which is that the populace has the illusion that they are participating in something. Whereas in reality, I mean, God knows what the actual voting total was because there's no trace. And how on earth people can turn around and say, oh, that's fine, Biden's been elected legitimately. I'm like, on a system that leaves no trace with more people voting than there are actual registered voters in the state. I mean, with dead people voting. you either got to be a complete joker or just completely delusional, or have an interest in, this is the biggest thing, I think, have an interest in portraying the thing as legitimate. Because that's for those who dismiss the stories about election rigging, they're not just stories, they're clearly evidence. Those who say, oh, well, the courts didn't find in favor of Trump. And I'm thinking, well, of course they didn't. Trump, again, the guy's a con man and a liar and a fraud, but it's clear that the entire political establishment turned on him. And because he wasn't supposed to win, he wasn't supposed to happen. Mm-hmm. So they've spent 4 years trying to derail whatever ideas that he had. He never really fought for them, but any ideas that he had was derailed. Any initiative he took was blocked. Essentially, the federal government machine mutinied against the sitting president. You had the extraordinary example of that was an official from the Pentagon when they had the investigation into that Ukraine phone call, where the officials from the Pentagon said the president went against the official foreign policy of the United States openly in Congress, basically saying, well, he might be the president, but the foreign policy is not decided by him, which is a remarkable admission. Again, other than independent media, no one talks about it. It ain't on BBC.
They're basically admitting what we've known for, I mean, I've known it for 7 years. There was a study in Princeton 7 years ago, 2013, 8 years ago now. It's an oligarchy. The greatest superpower on the planet is an oligarchy, and it's no wonder we're in trouble, because if you've got a situation where no matter how popular a policy is or a law is or whatever, there's a 30% chance of it passing. And whereas if there's money behind it, it doesn't matter how popular it is. There's an 80% chance of a popular. It doesn't matter if there's 0% of people want it. There's still an 80% chance of it passing because there's money behind it. This has been proved. And the other day, Alexander, when this capital thing that went on, we can talk about that in a minute if you want. But the other day when it was going on, I was honestly I'm going to vomit if I hear the word democracy and democracy and we've got to save the democracy. This is not a democracy at all. It's not even close to a democracy. What we've got over here is on shaky ground with regards to a democracy. So what you've got in America is far gone. It's far gone. And I'll be happy when things, change around the world, and maybe America hasn't got as much power as they've got, because they've certainly wielded it around the world over the last 20, 30 years in a way that's, well, I mean, I have a saying that I have a stat that if you actually take the 38 countries they're sanctioning and the amount of countries they've got a military presence in around the world for resources, and you look at the fact that they're economic warfare with China, etc., they're essentially at war with the planet's poorest 25% for resources. And that's essentially where we are now. And it's run away with us. And we've got to a situation where if we allow this to continue, pardon my language, Alexander, we're fucked. And we've got to change.
Yeah.
And there doesn't seem to be anybody who wants to stand up and stick his neck out and say, we've got to reverse course here. Otherwise, we're heading for disaster. And we've done this before. What do you make of the Capitol riots over there that you saw it?
It was another piece of theatre.
Can you
An
imagine?
absurd
Can you? Let me
beastly
ask you
torture.
this. Let me ask you this. Can you imagine? I don't know, a couple of thousand people going down to London, getting organised on Parler or Twitter, what have you, and going down to London and end up getting into the Houses of Parliament and, I don't know, sitting on the benches of the Houses of Parliament. Can you imagine any of that happening over here? And, well, I mean, you saw how it happened. The police just walked off.
Yeah, only if the Met Police decided that they wanted to let you in.
Yeah.
Basically, because I've been on more demos in London than I care to remember over the last 20 years, and all those big anti-war demos in the early 2000s, we went down to London. I mean, in the early 2000s, I was actually at university in Birmingham, part of the anti-war movement there, and we organised loads of coaches to go down, trying to get into, Downing Street, surrounding Parliament, and that kind of thing. No, rank after rank after rank of copper. Never let you in a million years. And then, a few thousand people turn up outside one of the biggest centers of imperialist power, and suddenly, like 5 guys, one of them dressed as apparently a sort of mutant Davy Crockett buffalo hybrid, wanders in and starts taking selfies. And then you get the video footage. I posted some of it on my own timeline, where the cops open a gate, let them in. They open a door, they let them in. And it's clear and obvious that what that was done for was to get the effect that we're having now, which is that suddenly I'll give Trump this. He managed in the space of 4 short years to make almost everybody see the Democratic Party for exactly what it is, which is that I find it just grotesque on a fundamental level to see all these like screeching wankers running around the TV studios bleating about America and democracy, when the whole thing, if you actually show any attention, is a stitch up. A guy sitting at Nancy Pelosi's desk smoking a cigar is not a coup.
No.
Russia 1993 is a coup. Juan Guaido in Venezuela is an attempted and failed coup. Chile 1973 is a coup. This is a guy having a cigar.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the way it's been packaged and portrayed, it was so predictable. Because the only means of legitimation the Democratic Party has got is pointing at the deplorables, as Hillary Clinton called them, and saying, look over there and shit yourself. Look at them. They've got people are shouting at me online saying, but they've got zip ties. And I said, well, you want zip ties? I can go down the road and buy some.
Yeah.
That's not scary. I've been on protests where, you look at a building funny and the police wade in and arrest everybody. This was a setup. And I can't get my head around the fact that so many people sitting on the American left have gone so far down this rabbit hole of like Trump as, the bad orange man, the bad orange fascist, whatever, that they are now screaming for the major corporations to essentially shut down free speech on the internet. And it's ridiculous. Yeah,
it really is. It beggars belief, to be honest, Alexander. It's not like we haven't seen this historically before. It's not like we can look back and say, you know what, censorship's always worked. Let's do that. It's never worked. It's always led to problems where it goes off and it festers in a corner. And I'm of the opinion that I want the fascists out there in front of me so I can punch them in the face. No, I want them in front of me. So whatever they say, I can counter. That whatever they can say, somebody with morals can counter it with good. Jimmy Dore says that the antidote to bad speech is good speech. It's not censorship. I want people to not be afraid to talk about ideas, whether those ideas be cruel to some people or what. I want people to talk about it. I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and like how many you know, if you look at, you know, it's a stupid analogy, but I could probably find a better one. If you look at the Post-it note, the Post-it note was made from a guy that was trying to create a glue which was absolutely, you couldn't, it was a super glue he was after, and he ended up creating something that was absolutely useless, but it was used for Post-it notes. I want the same sort of shit for speech. I want people to be able to make mistakes and be able to say, no, that's actually not, but we can use that, and you've onto something now, and we can use it with somewhere else. And that is, it's going to promote good, open discussion, rather than what we've got on Twitter at the moment, which is a bunch of crazy people throwing shit at each other.
Yeah, and the other thing is, of course, that the internet was meant to represent this great breakthrough in terms of free exchange of ideas, and it would be a great opportunity for people to inform themselves in a way that those in power did not want. And they've spent certainly the last 10 years trying desperately to reverse whatever part of that ideal did exist. And they've managed to do it by essentially inciting a certain scared layer of the American middle class into believing that the barbarians from Alabama are coming over the hill, riding in a mob, burning a cross. And what it is really is it's the withdrawal of these freedoms to just being the preserve of the very, very rich. That's what it is. Restoring the power of traditional or legacy capitalist media, restoring the power of the big media entities to say what is and what isn't the truth. I mean, 10 years ago when, you know, the whole Twitter thing first started, you could see these sort of establishment journalists getting shocked that ordinary people were replying to them and correcting them. And as soon as that happened, you know that these people were desperate to knock this off. They can't have the public sphere, as some call it, punctured by the everyday people. And this is what this is all about. This is the withdrawal of freedoms from the ordinary man and woman, and the solidification of them just for the elite. And to see a bunch of so-called socialists running along with it makes me glad I'm not involved in organized socialism anymore, because that would end with me doing violence, probably to my own liver.
It's a sad state of affairs. It really is. The state of socialism really is. It is. If some of the, especially some of the media in this country, are called socialists, I do find it laugh. You know, the people that you find in the Daily Mirror and the Guardian and whatever. Looking at the state of America, I was thinking about this the other day. It's not just America that needs this more than I think anything with regards to regulations, with regards to gun laws and what have you. They really need the same thing in my opinion, as the people of Saudi Arabia and the people of, or you know, third world countries. They need education, and how I found out about you, I stumbled across a video of yours called Bitter Charity. It's only 10, 20 or 12 minutes. What I wanted to talk to you about. And that starts off with, is it a guy from Nigeria, one of the African countries?
Burkina Faso.
Is it Burkina Faso?
The guy you're mentioning there is the president of Burkina Faso between 1983 and 1987. Prior to that, the country was called Upper Volta. It was a former French colony.
Right.
And Thomas Sankara was a military man who became president in 1983. He only lasted 4 years, but he was a real revolutionary in the sense that he was a man who was very much informed by his reading of Marxism, and his understanding of the place in the world of the newly independent, formerly colonized countries was such that he was able to spell out what they needed to do to actually clearly attain independence. And what the speech I included in the short film was from, I think, about 85. And he's talking in the speech about we as citizens of Burkina Faso and the wider African continent, we don't want this, you know, loans and charities and NGOs dominating our country. We want actual independence. We want to be able to develop our own resources. We want to be able to own and control our own economy. Because, and he says this in his writings and his speeches constantly, it's a theme he returns to, is that without that control, where if your economy is based on borrowing money from international banks, and if your income into your state is from overseas, if huge areas of your country are run by charitable organizations which are beholden to the Western capitalist powers, you don't have independence. You have, some call it neocolonialism, you have a show of independence. What the colonial powers have done, they've given you just enough rope to hang yourself with. The African nations force out Britain and France between the end of World War II and really the beginning of the 70s. And then you see a certain amount of growth in the former colonial countries. They start growing their economies. And then in the 80s, it's a dramatic pushback from the colonial forces to impose governments on them, which would then act as stooge regimes. And one of the ways they would do that is the stooge regime would take out large loans from the World Bank and the IMF, which could never be paid back. And that was intentional, because how does modern capitalism run? Runs on debt. Yes. Once they've got you,
grabs your resources,
that's it.
Extracts as much debt, exactly, as much from it as possible.
Yeah. So that's when the fact that he was able to articulate that, and one of the things he used to do was to show that his cabinet wasn't getting fat in office. He used to make them jog around the capital city in the morning, which is a tremendous.
Can you imagine Boris doing that? Come on, boys, we're going cycling around London.
He wouldn't make it a mile. But of course, because he was telling the truth and because he had a plan to make his nation independent, French imperialism killed him. They found a collaborator in his inner circle who assassinated him, and then Burkina Faso was back to being essentially a debtor nation of the French neo-colonial period. And Britain does this, so we've done the same things to countless African leaders. Kwame Nkrumah, the original leader of Ghana, a man who had a great vision of building socialism with African characteristics. The British were involved in a coup that overthrew him. There's countless others that Britain, France, Portugal, the Americans and the Belgians have all assassinated every time they've got a leader that's worth something. And then, so I started the short preview clip with that, and then I cut into the imperialists' favorite crap 80s musician, Bob Geldof, in live.
Give us your fucking money.
Well, after you, Bob, is the obvious retort to that one. You know, I included that because I mean the films I'm working on is going to be a 3-part series of 1-hour films. The first one, of course, will be called. The first one will be about that period in the 80s when Thomas Sankara is around and Live Aid starts, and that'll be called "Do They Know It's Christmas," which is, of course, after the Live Aid song. Which, given that Ethiopia is a predominantly Christian country, I think they do know it's fucking Christmas, Bob. The second one is going to be called "Mr. Clinton Goes to Haiti," and that's about. That's going to be about
on Epstein's plane.
Yes. Well, yeah. That's about the specifically if you remember the Haitian earthquake of about 10 years ago, and how the charity sector was used to essentially whitewash what was effectively an occupation of the country and its recolonization yet again, and all the theft and all the brutality that went along with that, and of course Clinton's direct involvement in profiting from that, as a lot of the WikiLeaks releases revealed back in 2016, the sheer dirtiness of the Clinton Foundation. Then the final one is called "The Human Machine," and it's about the emergence of the human rights organizations in the 60s as weapons in the Cold War against the communist states. and how the founders of Amnesty International were both linked to the intelligence agencies in both Britain and the United States, and the US one was implicated in the killing of Fred Hampton, who I include at the very last bit of that preview clip. So that's the films I'm going to be working on. The first one should be ready to go in March.
So who's Fred Hampton? Fred Hampton, the Black Panther guy.
Yeah. So one of the founders of Amnesty.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I didn't know his name or anything. I want to come to that, but going back to the guy from Burkina Faso. It's interesting. I wrote down something that's something he said. He said the Western world act like it's only the beggars that need aid. It's like the only reason that we need the aid is because you take everything from us. It's because you come in and your corporation strip all of the assets and all of everything that we've got. And I can't remember the name of the movie now. And it's the analogy I liked. There's a movie where it's a prison and it's underground, and they're all on different levels. There's like 10 different levels, and the food comes at the top, and the food is for all of them. And every 5 minutes, and then it goes to the next level, and it goes to the next level, and it goes to the next level. Now, there's enough food for all of them in the prison. All they have to do is take their fair share. But by the time it gets to the mid sections, there's no food left because the people at the top have taken it all. You know, everybody, and he does. The guy he does say that the guy from Burkina Faso. What was his name, Alexander?
Thomas Sankara.
He says we produce enough for us all. We do. And there's 7-8 billion nearly 8 billion now, I presume, on this planet. And I remember years ago, it was always the global population that was the problem, the real problem. There's not enough food. No, there's enough food to sustain us all. The fact of the matter is, we're just greedy, and we've got a system that is built that promotes the most sociopathic and psychopathic amongst us into the top positions. We have tax systems which reward the biggest liars and the biggest corrupt people, the people who are willing to cut the most corners. We have a system that's built on that. And I wanted to go back to that because when you did that video, it struck a chord for me. People know what the problem is all around the world, and they have done for hundreds of years. And we're still saying the same things. At the end of that, the Black Panther guy, that was enlightening for me. I've never seen that. That's Fred Hampton.
Oh, yeah. What I did was I just spent, for the whole thing, I've just spent hours trawling through the publicly available news archives on YouTube and a few other sites, and you can find all manner of.
And who's he talking to in the clip? Is it two bankers he's talking to? Like credit union?
No, he's talking to a guy who wants to form a credit union. I believe in Detroit, and what he's saying in the clip is it's quite revelatory, really, because again, I've seen films about Fred Hampton. I hadn't seen that clip before, and what he's saying is to the guy, okay, well, you want to start this financial institution, okay, well, that's not enough. That's not enough just to give to, without the education. Yeah, all that's going to happen is that people are going to start nicking from it.
Yeah, and you're going to end up with the same problems that you've got with the system that we've got already.
Yeah. And that was really one of the reasons why he was the most dangerous revolutionary leader in America, most dangerous leader to the ruling class out of all of them, because he was a guy. He was killed when he was only 24 years old, and he was working in Chicago principally, I think, and he was a Black Panther leader who managed to get the poor white working class that's in the Illinois countryside, who were dismissed by many people as just hopeless racists. He brought them in and united them with the Black Panther organization to form a genuinely sort of working class alliance between the black and white working class. Now, of course, that's why they killed him, because it was personally ordered by J. Groover, the head of the FBI, and carried out by the Chicago police with the assistance of a spy they'd inserted into Hampton's inner circle. It was this guy who was who the police use a lot. He was an ex-criminal who'd been pressured in, who was drug addicts who'd been pressured into turning on Hampton and basically informing on him. The guy, the fate of the guy who informed on him is pretty miserable as well. In the end, he killed himself by wandering out into traffic on the freeway because he couldn't live
shoot
with it.
himself in the back of the head twice like they do over here, though.
No, it's amazing the angles you can get an assault rifle at, isn't it? But Hampton emphasizing that in that clip, he says, look, we don't want people to come down here and give us stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want, people just setting something up and then walking away. People have got to understand that they have not only just the right, but the duty to control the resources in their community. And the only way you get that is by educating them, not just through book learning, but by political action in a way that they can relate to their everyday lives. And that's what made him such a dangerous figure, because he sat down there and he's expounding some fundamental points of Marxism in a way that people will take in, because he wasn't doing it in a barren and alien language.
I'd heard his name before, and I didn't know who he was. It didn't connect with me when I saw the film. That that was Fred Hampton. I didn't. It's like, I've heard that name, and I never associated it with the Black Panthers or anything like that. But it's no wonder, because I remember watching your video, and I was just transfixed watching him. This guy just educate these two guys who they must have looked at Fred as if to say, well, we're the more educated ones. No. He flipped the tables on them, and he's really, he's saying to them, listen, we've got a six-week educational program that people go through just to get in the Black Panthers. Where's your educational system with regards to it? And and the guys are looking at each other, and it's flat, because you can see that they're not really in it there to help the community. They're in it to help themselves. And it's weird that you talk about the next thing you went on there to talk about is the 80s with Bob Geldof and Band-Aid. So I'm so glad that he solved hunger in Africa when everybody solved that one.
Solved. It's over. It's over. They know it's Christmas now. It's over.
It's charity is it's become a con. Hasn't it? I know somebody very close to me, Alexander, who started a charity, and it's a charity that people will probably have heard of. It's quite a big charity, and she started it, and somebody else came in, and it was a charity that helped people get back on their feet, which most charities, do, and before very long, they started to get the business. It started to get a lot of money because it was helping a lot of people. That it was started to get invitations. They were going to the BBC, etc., and getting large grants from. I've found out all about the system and the book that you've got to get involved on if you want to get charity from the royal family, etc. And I remember that my friend wanted to bring somebody who they'd helped from the system into, the sort of the charity to help run the charity. I think that's what it was. And the partners said, no, that we're not going to do that. These people are not our friends. And at that point, my friend realized, this is the money that you're after. It's not the helping people. They're out there, and this charity's still going, and or at least it was until COVID happened. And but it seems to me like it's a grift charity in this country. For instance, whenever I go to the shop or I see anybody collecting money on the street, and these people are wonderful, by the way, who give their time to collect for charity and whatever, I think they're wonderful, but I wonder whether they would be there if they knew how much the CEO of that charity got, because they all get hundreds of thousands of pounds a year, don't they, mate?
Yeah, it's big money. And it's when you look at how much is spent on admin and salaries for senior staff, and this is just in, charities operating inside Britain, and on smaller budgets than the gigantic international charities. If their budgets are all going on salaries and expenses, and it's just essentially a career ladder for the middle class, really. That's all it is. And you look at the gigantic international ones like Oxfam, and I don't know if you remember a few years ago they had that report into the sexual abuse scandals that
yes, Haiti came up over there as well, didn't it?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I'm looking at it for one of the films, is because it says so much, that report, about the way that the charities act in these poor developing world countries. They send people over there to act like essentially old school colonial administrators, which is exactly how these guys who were basically sex trafficking women were acting. They were acting like they were colonial era governors, but that's the job that they've been doing for the United States, Britain, France, and other countries. The charity sector is now used to prepare the ground for more hardcore military interventions. And that's happened in dozens of countries all over the world. And the fact that they're implicated in so much sexual abuse and other crimes, it all runs out of that.
I've been covering. I don't know whether you've been covering much on your channel about the incident that happened in Duma in 2017 or whatever it was.
Yes.
And I've been covering what's been happening in Syria. And just to highlight your point about charity, there's meant to be, well, I mean, it's called the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. I don't know whether you've heard of it.
Yes, one bloke in Coventry, isn't it?
One bloke about 25 miles from us in Coventry. Yeah. He's probably midway between us at the moment. We should go over there and have a chat with him. From all intents and purposes, Alexander, I think he works very hard, and he certainly seems to be very busy from what I've seen. But this is a guy in Coventry, and yet they call it the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, like it's this big organization, this big Red Cross organization in Syria. No, it's a guy in Coventry who fled Syria because he was going to go to prison by the looks of it for the third time or fourth time for fraud charges, who came over to Britain, and then he got a grant of 198,000 from the government for, quote, equipment. And he's been reporting on human rights abuses in Syria ever since. And whenever he reports anything, it gets picked up by the BBC, the Guardian, the Times, the Telegraph, etc., etc., etc. And it's blasted out there as if it's 100% true, when this guy doesn't know. He doesn't know what the hell is going on in Syria. How can he? He's in Coventry.
Yeah, he's playing his role in the network, and his role is to authenticate what would otherwise look like propaganda. So, I mean, the Syrian thing is interesting that you mentioned it, because through the prism of Syria, you can actually understand an awful lot about the way that American, British, and other imperialist countries' power actually works.
Yeah, we do their propaganda for them, and America go in and do the regime change. That's basically what's happening, isn't it? We're doing the propaganda for them.
Yeah, I mean, the British government was responsible for the foundation of and the funding of the so-called White Helmets, who were a group of essentially jihadists who occasionally do posed photos looking like they're rescuing people. And the founder was a guy called James Le Mesurier, who was a British army officer and obviously an intelligence guy. Yeah. Who then mysteriously killed himself by hurling himself off his own balcony in Turkey.
If he was strange how these if he was Russian, work. He would have been Novichoked, mate. If he was Russian.
Yeah. With poisoned underpants. That was how they got Navalny, apparently. Poisoned underpants.
I'm sorry. I've got to laugh at it. You've got to laugh at it. Why would they poison him with the most Russian-sounding nerve agent in the... Come on! This is like... Schoolboys wouldn't believe it, but they just repeat it like it's so ridiculous.
You repeat the lie long enough and hard enough, and they don't need it for it all to go in. They just need for the general gist of it to sink into people's consciousness, don't they? And that's why it's repeated so loudly and so often. It's, I mean, as for I mean, the Novichok attacks apparently in this country, I mean, that was laughable as well. It's like the story kept changing every 5 minutes. Nobody knows where Skripal now is and his daughter. Nobody knows why their handler has so many direct connections with the BBC correspondent, Mark Urban. Nobody knows apparently anything, and it's certainly never reported. And we're supposed to believe that he got it off his car door handle, and then months later, that poor woman dies because she found a bottle in a bin. I'm like, this doesn't make any fucking sense whatsoever. You've got to be, the only way it makes sense is if you repeat it in a breathless tone enough on the 6 o'clock news and don't give any information about it. And that's how the propaganda works. It doesn't make sense if you unpack it, but the job of the BBC and ITN is not to unpack anything. It's to shout it, put up a graph and move on.
It's mind control is what it is. It's mind control. It's
stopping you thinking.
I sit here, and Caitlin Johnston, I'm sure you know, is one of my favourite writers, and she wrote an article, I think it was a couple of years ago now, how once your eyes can see the puppet show that's going on in front of you, it's the difference between paying your entrance to a Punch and Judy show and sitting in the Punch and Judy show and watching it and being entertained, to somebody running up to you in the street and just going like that to you and saying, look, these two things are talking to each other. Once you see the theatre of it all, you can't unsee it, can you? It's everywhere. No. And it's blatant, and the BBC are the biggest, the biggest and the best at it. They've got 30,000 employees around the world doing it 24/7, haven't they?
Yeah, and the trust that you're brought up as, you know, growing up in Britain. I grew up in the sort of late 80s, early 90s, and you're brought up to see this as the repository of truth. I was lucky in a way in that I started fairly early on thinking, well, too much about this doesn't make any sense. And then after the Iraq war, that was when it really started to make no sense, because I barely knew a single person who was actually for it. And yet it happened anyway. So I'm thinking that's what woke me up to the fact that, well, there was 2 million odd of us in London. There was hundreds of thousands of people demonstrating almost every day up to the point itself. And in the end, it didn't matter, because the people who ran the state were determined to do it, and the media were there to lie for them. And that's what sort of got me on the road of actually thinking about these things differently. And since then, 18 years ago now, I've not been able to look at it the same way since. Exactly as you said, you can't sit down and watch the news and be taken in by it now, because it's like watching somebody's school drama project.
I tune in to like the American channels for half an hour every morning. I get my news in about an hour's burst, just to see what the propaganda was saying. And you may have noticed, I think it was yesterday or the day before, Pompeo denounced that the Houthi rebels were going to be designated as a terrorist group. And I thought, this is going to be hilarious. So I thought, right, okay, I'll tune into CNN and hear them. How are CNN going to talk about the Houthi rebels without talking about the Yemen war? So this is a Yemen war that we're backing, the UK and the US. Basically, it wouldn't be going on without our say so. We're backing the Saudis in it. We're picking out the targets. We're, doing the assessments on the ground. We're training the pilots. We're selling them the bombs and selling them the planes and blah, 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 blah. We're doing everything apart from pull the trigger. That's basically what we're doing. We're backing this war, which is the largest humanitarian crisis in the world, the largest outbreak of cholera the world has ever seen. And then the Saudis go and bomb the water towers on purpose. There's something like 20 million people starving over there at the moment. So how is CNN going to talk about the Houthi rebels, who are the people who are basically on the side of democracy, from what I can tell? How are they going to talk about the Houthi rebels without talking about the war? And I tuned in, Alexander, and I shit you not, I heard them talk. He said it about 5 times in 2 minutes before I had to turn over. I was laughing so much. And he was talking about it, how the war in Yemen, the United States are the largest humanitarian aid for the war in Yemen. I said, I turned to my girlfriend, I said to my fiance, I said, that's the equivalent of saying, we're brilliant because as doctors, we break people's legs, but then we go and fix them as well. It was incredible. The anchor, the reporter, the journalist stood down. Yes, and there was no pushback on it all. They never even mentioned the Yemen war. I think MSNBC have done 1 2-minute segment on it in 3 years. You know, the people in that country are the same as the people in this country. If they know what's going on, they would be horrified and they would change it, and that's why they keep them in the dark and fed on bullshit.
Yeah. Well, the thing about the Yemen war is, as you say, it wouldn't happen if it wasn't being run. If the war is being run really from Washington and London, it's just they've got their regional client in the form of the Saudis to do the dirty work for them. And even with all the advantages of British and American weapons of war and guidance systems and military officers directing the war from the HQs in Saudi, they still can't win.
No.
Because the Saudis still don't have an army that can actually hold any ground in Yemen, or barely any ground. They keep losing every time they actually have to fight the Yemeni. The Houthis are sort of morphed into a national government now.
Yeah.
Now, whatever the philosophy of that, it's a government which is aiming to reunify the country and run it as a country, not as a client state of Britain or the United States. And that's the reason why they're getting hammered. And it's the last 3 prime ministers, Cameron, May, and Johnson, should all be on trial for war crimes if there was any justice in the world, because they are the ones who have made this happen. They should all be locked up. So Cameron should be locked up for Libya, for us to start there. May should just be locked up mainly for her own safety. Johnson should be confined somewhere for public health reasons. But they are all up to their necks in this Yemen situation. And the fact that the British media have done about 1 report on it, which blamed Iran for everything, or now Pompeo's saying, well, you know, the Iranians are linked to Al Qaeda. I'm like, you're not even bothering to try anymore, are you? You're not even trying with the lies. It's just the same old bullshit that you tried 10 years ago.
And the media are the same at the moment with, you know, if it's Yemen, it's they're backed by Iran. If it's, you know, people in the Golan Heights, they're backed by Iran. If it's people in Lebanon, they're backed by Hezbollah. And if it's obviously anywhere else in the world, then it's Russia! Oh, Russia, the crazy Russians are coming to get us.
Yeah, everything is a Rambo movie now, but not as entertaining.
When's the next part of your documentary coming out then?
Well, the first part, entitled "Do They Know It's Christmas," will be coming out in late March. It's the script's done. I'm in the process of stitching together like an hour of footage in a way that tells the story, and then after that, we're kind of going to be releasing the second one in July, and then the final one towards the end of the year to space it out. So end of March, really keep an eye out for the first one.
I'll look forward to it, Alexander. When you publish it, make sure you send me a link and I'll promote it as best as I can. Is there anything you want to talk about while I got you here? We've been talking about an hour. I don't want to leave you to have you on too long. Everybody will get bored with you.
I will talk at great length for on demand. The only other thing worth mentioning is the fact that you know, this censorship thing in the US is really gonna need to open people's eyes up to the need to.
Alexander, I think, just to stop you, I think the best thing to do is to hand our free speech over to Silicon Valley. I'm sure that they will use whatever powers they've got responsibly, and you know, I'm sure they won't do anything rash with it, like, I don't know, silence the president of the United States.
Well, you know, I mean, they are. You know, I heard the other day that you know Trump had a cameo in Home Alone 2, Lost in New York.
Yes,
they're digitally editing him out of it.
Are they really? But
a 30-year-old film.
That's going to go against the contract, isn't it? Because whenever Trump I think this is right. He puts it in his contracts whenever they want to use a Trump hotel in the film. In the contract, it says yes, but I've got to be in it. I think that's how he ends up in so many movies.
Well, the thing about this is they are literally doing what they used to accuse the communist states of, which is just erasing people from history. If they could erase the last 4 years, they would do, because they've got this mad, it's a mania there amongst the ruling class in the United States and Britain. They want desperately to go back to 2014, before Trump, before Corbyn, before Sanders, before Brexit. But of course they can't, because the cat's out of the bag and isn't going back in anytime soon. So this Biden administration is going to be dangerous for the world, because they're going to keep trying to restore what they thought they had before Trump came along. But Trump has done the world a service in a way he didn't mean to, which is the mask's off now.
Yeah.
You know, and the fact that they are now imposed via a rigged election, a man obviously in the mid stages of dementia as president, that's like a story out of science fiction. And they're all pretending that he doesn't have it. Oh, he's got a stutter.
It's the way he precludes. He even does this in tweets, which makes me think he writes his own tweets. He hasn't got a staffer doing it there for him, because he precludes every speech. He goes, "Let me make this clear," or "Let's get one thing straight," and then goes on to say something so tepid it's unreal. You know, he says, "Let me number one," and then it just goes on. Number one, we've got to get the vaccine to people on time, and then maybe. Number two, I honestly, I don't think he's all there. And I honestly look at the whole thing and I think there's no way they're going to let him be president. He's going to have an unselfish stroke and President Kamala is going to be inaugurated.
Oh, yeah.
I still think that, I just don't, even America aren't crazy enough. They were crazy enough to let Donald Trump have a go. I don't think they're truly crazy enough to let somebody clearly suffering with dementia have a go. He's suffering with dementia, isn't he?
He obviously is. I mean, I've seen cases of it that have occurred to people I've known, and it's so clear as to what that is, what he's going on with him. I mean, my personal theory is that they'll inaugurate him, then he'll disappear for 43 days, and then he'll resign for health reasons.
Yeah.
Because that will make him not the shortest lived president. The shortest lived president was William Henry Harrison, who died of pneumonia having made a 3-hour speech about tariffs at his inauguration in the rain. And then you get President Harris, who they wanted from the start. Other than then she got dismantled by Tulsi Gabbard in one debate, then resigned and quit the whole thing because she didn't have the wit to respond. And I mean, they're going to replace the demented guy with the woman who is all ambition, no brain. So really, who's driving the
candidate, bus? Alexander? She's a top tier candidate, remember?
Yes, because she said she was.
It won't be health. I don't think that'll be the reason. It won't be health. It'll be the Hunter Biden thing, because they've launched it was only a couple of days ago. This is under the radar as well. It hasn't got much press, but they've actually launched a criminal probe into Hunter Biden now in New York, I think it is. So that happened a couple of days ago. So if I didn't write this stupid story, so I've sort of given up on trying to predict anything, because let's face it, I mean, it's just so nuts. But I mean, if I was a betting man, I would say, it's going to be some sort of, corruption, the money thing with regards to the Biden family, or that Ukraine, China, etc. That means he has to step down. But they're not going to let him be president for long, for sure.
I think if he do, even if they go ahead and mad enough to inaugurate him, they'll then have to pension him off very, very quickly afterwards. And the other crazy thing is, if they keep kicking the Trump supporters while they're down, and keep demonizing them, and keep going after them with law enforcement just for walking around the Capitol building and taking a selfie, well, they're going to create a real problem I don't think they care that they're creating a real problem, but they are going to create a problem, which is that it's going to, a lot of these guys are going to draw some rather more interesting political conclusions and go off and do something else, because Trump's lost control now. He's been disgraced in front of his own supporters. So somebody out there, someone enterprising enough who's a sort of far right guy, can pick this up and probably run with it.
The perfect situation.
It depends if any.
It's the perfect.
Especially if after that, after if the COVID lockdowns stop, which Biden and Harris are now saying that they're going to stop once the vaccine's been rolled out, but it's hundreds of thousands of people who run small businesses on their arse broke. That's a real breeding ground for actual fascism.
Yeah, you've also got like millions of people that are about to be, booted out of their own homes. You've got millions of people, obviously, in food lines as well. And these people are going to be watching those scenes at the Capitol. I'm remembering that 6 months ago, the Black Lives Matter protesters were fucking brutalized by the police, brutalized to the point where they were running them over in cars. And then you've got pictures of these people at the Capitol taking selfies as the police are helping them down the stairs. People at home are going to be seeing that and saying, well, clearly this field is tilted. Clearly this table is tilted and the game is rigged, isn't it? Because, you're giving trillions. They're giving trillions away to their friends in Wall Street and on business, and they're not giving people anything. I mean, at least over here, can you imagine, Alexander, in the UK, them doing over here what they've done in America? And then anybody who's been any business that's closed or anything, they've got no help from the government. We paid 80% of the wages over here. Obviously, from what I saw, obviously fell down massively, but at least there was signs that they were at least trying to help people financially. Over in America, they've had $600. And that's it. I mean, I don't know whether they've had another 600 recently or they've got 2,000. I don't know. I don't think they have. I have got anything, have they yet? Can you imagine what would we have done in the UK if they tried that over here?
Well, I think there would have been probably a large-scale revolt against the Conservative Party, certainly often from Conservative Party voters themselves, especially because the small businessman is a lot of the Tory Party voting base. So if they'd have allowed them to go to the wall, that would have been their own voting base fucked. So they couldn't let them just perish. There's the other thing I wanted to mention was it's now very clear and very obvious that the Democrats under Pelosi blocked any attempt at a second stimulus in the summer to maximize the pain on people, to make sure it all got pinned on Trump. And that's when she was asked about that recently. She had a sort of meltdown, and presumably James Corden had to run in and feed her some ice cream or something to get her back on track again. But they did that very deliberately, and they made a very deliberate, calculated, and very cynical choice to maximize the pain on ordinary Americans. And whereas I think that the politicians here would probably do that if they thought they needed to. But the fact that they were prepared to go so far just to get it all pinned on Trump and just to get him out tells me that the American ruling class in a certain section of them have lost their fucking minds, because that's an incredibly risky political move.
Have you witnessed the disappointment of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the other so-called progressives over there?
Well, I mean, it's ironic, isn't it, that a week and a half ago, she was saying that Jimmy Dore was doing violence by demanding things that did she do the things that she ran on, and the rest of them as well. It's not just her, it's the rest of them. And then a week later, she's calling for free speech to be shut down because it's inciting violence. So, I mean, it's clear that she, from the very beginning, was yelling for more censorship on social media. And then she was never what she appeared to be or what she was sold as. Back before all this started, back in the earlier part of the decade that's just gone, she was an intern for Senator Edward Kennedy. She was chosen to get into one of the sort of elite government and politics programs. So she's somebody who's had a career lined up in Washington for quite some time. And she just put on a new outfit, so to speak, when the Sanders wave came. And a lot of them just put on a new outfit. And this last 2 weeks has just really revealed it for what it is, which is it's just clothing over what is a pretty ordinary bog standard Democrat. That's all she is.
There's a word for her that I heard the American footballer the progressive guy, I forgot his name now, J-Man Prime on Twitter.
Justin Jackson.
Justin Jackson, that's it. He calls her a celebritician.
That's
the perfect word for
she's just an influencer, you know. No more depth to her than those people who open boxes on YouTube for a living, you know.
It's a shame, mate. It really is. Alexander, thanks so much for talking to me, mate. I've learned a few things. I always love doing these podcasts. I learn so much. Where can people find you, mate? Are you on YouTube, or have you got your?
I am on YouTube. Just type in my name.
You're still on there at the moment, then?
Well, I checked this morning. I'm still on there. Who knows? I'm on. You can find the podcast I do. It's called the Red Star Radio Podcast. You just find it on all the usual platforms. Proviso for now, and you can find me on Twitter under Alex Davidson 82. Again, for now. So, barring that, I will be sending a series of postcards to most mailboxes in the UK if it gets shut down. I'm going old school.
Yeah, let's go old school. Go carrier pigeons and Chinese whispers.
Carrier pigeons and smoke signals. I'll be doing smoke signals from the Derbyshire Hills. You should be able to pick them up in the Midlands.
Alexander, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Gordon.